appreciate you all coming out. And without further ado, I'll give it over to Yiwei.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys for coming. It's good to see you in person because I know I've talked to a lot of you over the phone. So today, I thought one of the topics that we would talk about is how to start a profitable short-term rental Airbnb in 2024. It's one of the most common questions I get asked, or a lot of things out there about like, is Airbnb dead? Are people still making money? Like all these things. So I thought I would just go through how I think through starting Airbnb now in 2024. So just a little bit about me. I started in Cincinnati when I moved here for work. And I actually worked corporate before I came here. I started on accident with my first Airbnb because I bought a house and I had an apartment with a lease I couldn't get out of. So I was like, well, let's try this Airbnb thing because my coworker said he was making money on there and I don't have to make 2 payments. So we started with my house as an Airbnb. And I made so many mistakes with that I would not recommend to anybody. But I was able to see a way that I can actually make money with real estate, because at the time I was looking to invest in real estate, but I was like, I cannot understand how people are making money because you only cash flow like $100, $200 a month with the long-term rental. But ever since that, I was pretty hooked on this short-term rental thing. I could see a way how I could make money. So I did that. I left my corporate job in 2022. So it took me 3 years of doing all of this on the side during COVID until I was able to replace my income that way. And now I own and manage about 27 short-term rentals in the Cincinnati area, from downtown all the way to the suburbs, Oakley, Hyde Park, Mason, Loveland. And we have a 7-figure annual booking revenue annually. I've been doing this for 4.5 years now, and I've set up over 40 short-term rentals. And one of the things that I really like to talk about is it's great to do it for a long time, but also having great reviews and the guest experience as we're doing it, because it's not about the quantity for me. It's about the quality and being sustainable with that. And just to give a little overview, here's some of the homes that I've set up over the years that we own. Some are the ones I own and some are the ones we manage. So I just want to go through one of the first questions I think lots of people are asking. How is the Cincinnati market for short-term rentals? Because Cincinnati is probably not the top place people think for vacation rentals. So I just want to go through some of the numbers from AirDNA. If you guys are interested, there's a lot of things to think through for short-term rentals, like regulations, supply and demand. But before I go into that, on the chart, you can see how the listings have grown over the years. So on the graph is from 2021. So over the last 3 years, you can see how it's almost basically doubled in the last few years. You're starting to see a dip, and that's just because of some people taking their short-term rentals offline now, but it's starting to go up some more. But in general, short-term rentals is still a huge thing in Cincinnati, and I don't expect it to go away. The second thing I want to point out, and we'll get to that later, is the breakdown of the listings by rental size. So lots of people think if I want a good short-term rental, I need to be downtown because that's where the restaurants are, that's where the games are, that's where everything is. But downtown is where you get a lot of the 1-bedrooms. So you can see here, 50% of the listings are 1-bedrooms. And then about 26% are 2-bedrooms. So between the 1 and 2 bedrooms, you're at 75% of the market almost. So we'll go through why that is important later on too. But I do want to give a recap of the short-term rental industry because it was not a big thing. Somehow short-term rentals, Airbnbs got super popular and everybody wanted to invest in it. But before COVID, it was not a thing. I feel like that happened after COVID. But before COVID, it was just not, it was still growing, but I feel like it peaked during COVID when people weren't going to hotels. They're now traveling with their family, so they want a place where they don't have to share room or share a shared hallway. They don't have to share an elevator. So during COVID, lots of people started exploring Airbnbs and traveling and staying in them. So that's where the big boom came. And I would say that's where a lot of the highest rates came into. So in 2021, 2022, you've had the biggest rental rates in the short-term rental industry across the US. And then everybody's like, wow, you're making so much money in here. I want to get in too. So then the supply started coming up because now everybody's buying in those areas. Interest rates were low. Prices were going up. So now you've got people buying $1 million in Gatlinburg or Orlando at 3.5% interest rates. So they bought at the peak of the market with low rates. And then fast forward to now, 2023, 2024, where the demand has basically leveled out, but supply has gone up a lot. So there is this shift in the market where rates are starting to come down and occupancy are starting to come down some. And that is just because there's a lot on the market. And when you buy at such high rates, lots of people can't sustain that financially because they bought at such a high price and maybe they were new to short-term rentals, they don't have the experience to know what it takes to operate a really profitable one or one that gets the most revenue. And then that is where you see that dip coming where people are like, okay, now I'm out, I'm selling, or I'm turning back into a long-term rental. It's just a lot more competition out there just because the supply is more, but the demand has been the same now. The other thing about Cincinnati is the regulations. So since City of Cincinnati really welcomed short-term rentals, the regulations didn't come in place until October of 2018. Before that, it was just anybody can do whatever they wanted. In 2018, they started their regulations in the City of Cincinnati. So as long as you have property in the City of Cincinnati, you can basically do short-term rentals with it. But once you get outside of the city, when you get into places like Blue Ash or Sharonville or this area, they start banning short-term rentals because you've got neighbors who say, oh, I don't want people coming and going. I just don't want to be next to an Airbnb. So lots of these places start banning rentals or anything they're calling more than 30 days. But there's still pockets where it's still allowed, like Westchester, Mason, there's still lots of areas that are allowed. So when you look for one, just make sure to take regulations into consideration. But it is not like New York or LA or San Francisco where they're just like banning it completely. Or lots of Northern Kentucky is like that too, where they're saying like you either have to live in it or you just not allowed. Like Newport just doesn't even allow it. So I feel like the City of Cincinnati is still pretty good for rentals.
I'm going to break my own rule. Sorry. Is there anywhere, like if somebody wants to get into short-term rental and they don't know whether or not Blue Ash or Marymount or Madeira is like regulated, is there anywhere that they can go to figure that out? Or would they have to make like calls to local people, or how do they figure it out?
To know if a place allows short-term rentals is the zoning code. So you have to go to that city zoning code or township or village and see what does it say. So like Terrace Park, they don't exclusively say you can't do short-term rentals. They say you can't have more than 3 leases per year. So that's how they like get around that. Some places will say like, okay, you have to, like Milford's going crazy with theirs. I think they're saying like a short-term rental is anything less than 3 months or 6 months or something. And it's like, that's just some arbitrary number they pulled out. But it's every city is the zoning code is where you would know where that is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but City of Cincinnati, you should be good unless you're like in a downtown building. Then I would definitely make sure that the building does not exceed the number of permits because they do regulate in condo buildings how many is allowed. Okay, so the next thing is who is coming to Cincinnati? Because it's not Orlando, it's not Aspen, it's not, a fun place for lots of people. So who is coming to Cincinnati? So I would say there's mostly what I call 3 categories of people who are coming. The first one is the people who actually are coming here for vacation. So you've got the weddings, you've got people coming for concerts, like think Taylor Swift concert, like it sold out Cincinnati basically. Any like Bengals games, Reds games, weddings, lots of weddings here in Cincinnati. Like every single weekend there's a wedding, multiple weddings. So that's the vacation people, or people coming to visit their kids at Xavier, or coming to graduation and visiting family. So that's your first category. The second one is going to be the people who come here for work. So that could be construction workers. Like I recently just had a group of guys book a house because they each got their own room for like 2 weeks because they worked at the Duke power plant or something. So it's like you got construction workers, you've got people that are coming here for work, like the Bengals players, like the professional athletes who have a house somewhere else that they live, but they play for Cincinnati, so they got to be here during the season. Or you'll get people who are relocating for work. So maybe they work for like P&G, they work for Cintas, they work for these like bigger name companies, and they're getting that relocation. So they need a place to stay. Or actually like the movies, lots of people don't know, but city of Cincinnati, or not just Cincinnati, Ohio in general gives like a 30% rebate to any spending you make or is spent in Ohio. So a lot of like people that come here to film movies, they get a huge rebate on everything they spend in Ohio. That's like lodging, catering, anything they spend, like people costs. So that's also a huge thing. I feel like they do films in Cincinnati, maybe like 1 or 2 films a year. They come and do that. So lots of work-related stuff. And then the other one is all the medical treatment. So there's like families coming from all over the world here to have treatment for their kids, cancer treatments, surgeries, even like that's where you'll get the medical, the traveling nurses, that kind of stuff. So there's like a wide variety of people. And this is why I actually like it better than a lot of the vacation markets, because like if you think about it, in Gatlinburg, like you're really just targeting the tourists, people who are visiting. And I'm sure there's like so many people visiting, but you have really no other option. It's like, can you rent to like traveling nurses in Gatlinburg? Can you rent to like insurance claims in Gatlinburg? It's going to be a lot tighter market. Here you have a lot more variety. You have a lot of people coming for multiple different reasons. So it's like if short-term doesn't work, maybe you could do midterm. If midterm doesn't work, you can supplement with short-term. Or if none of that works, then you can always go back to long-term. So it's like not putting yourself in and saying, I only cater to vacation people or tourists. Okay, the other question that lots of people want to know is, how much money can I make? That's the question people want to know. Like, I want to know that too, but there are so many factors. I wish it was a simple answer, but I would say there's so many factors that goes into how much money you can make. First of all, being your financing. So if you pay cash, you have a 1031 exchange and everything is cash, versus you got to take out a loan, versus if you're doing a DSCR loan, or you're like house hacking, like you live in it and then you move out. There's so many different ways that works. But I would say the first thing you know is to know your numbers, and you got to know that before you buy a place. So don't just buy a place and then figure out what your numbers are. It's like figure out your numbers and then decide if you want to invest in this. And that's your revenue. That's going to be your expenses. So typically your expenses, your costs are going to be the same. So that's like your mortgage, regardless of whether you're doing long-term, midterm, short-term, your mortgage is going to be the same. Your property taxes is going to be the same. The only thing that's going to be different with a short-term rental or a midterm is you're going to add the utilities. You're going to add a higher insurance because the liability is different. So knowing your costs is going to be important. And I would look at it at a monthly detail level. Like lots of people talk about like cap rates or all these like things that I don't even know what they are. But I'm like, if I can't think or see it, it's hard for me to understand. So it's like, what is the landscaping cost to somebody to mow this grass? Like what is the gas, water, trash bill? Like that's all the stuff to get an estimate on beforehand. And it's not really difficult to know because you'll know like for this size of house, it's this much or whatever. So know your numbers. And then I would say in my 4.5 years of experience, everything I've done, places that have not been profitable, places that have been profitable, it all comes down to 3 factors as to how much money you can make in a short-term rental. This is everything I've just summarized, and this is how I decide what to do to a property to get the most money I can. So the first factor is going to be location. How desirable is this area or location to the guest? And it's really cliche to say that location is super important in real estate, but I found that to be very true in short-term rentals, because if a guest does not like that location, they will not leave good reviews, or they will pick at other things and find a way to get out of it. So lots of people, when you think about the people who are coming and staying, they're not local to the area. They don't know this street is safe or not at night. If they come in and they see like this house is like a bunch of trash in their yard, and then this other house next door has like siding falling off, even though your house is like super renovated or new construction, they could be like, this is so amazing on the inside, but I don't like the area. And then they will ding you on that. And being in an area where a guest wants to be is the number one thing, because that's something you cannot change. Like, you can't move this house to a different area. Like, if somebody doesn't like the bathroom, the flooring, the carpet, you can change that, but you cannot change location. Like, you're stuck with it. So the first thing is location is super important. And that doesn't even have to apply to like Cincinnati. Even if you're in a vacation destination, if people want to be on the beach, they're going to Florida and they're renting a house, they want to be on the beach. So if your house is 2 miles from the beach, they don't want that. They want to be on the freaking beach. So that is basically like knowing what they're looking for and like giving them that location. So, and it's going to vary by places. Like Cincinnati, they want to be in a good neighborhood. I usually like to say like Class A neighborhoods. So like your Oakley, Hyde Parks, Mason, like those nice neighborhoods where maybe they would be where they used to live, or where they live when they're at home. So it's like similar good areas. And then even in vacation areas, it's the same. It's like there's desirable locations more than other areas. And the second thing is the interior design and the amenities. So that is what makes your listing stand out among others in the area, because we talked about there's going to be a lot of houses or a lot of listings that are now on the market. What makes your property stand out from others, and what makes guests want to pay for yours more than others. So it's kind of like an attention grabbing thing. It's like, why should somebody stay at your place versus like the 200 other listings that are in the area? How are they going to click on that listing? Because when you're searching on like Airbnb or something, all you see are pictures. So like they don't even get to read what you're writing unless they click into that listing. So when you're looking at the different pictures, that's where the interior design is important and the amenities you provide are important. Because if they don't even click on it, you don't even get a chance to say, if you don't get good reviews or good anything, like you're not even showing up on search. Like if they're looking for certain amenities and you don't have that, then you don't even show up. So having that is super important. And then the last thing is the size and layout. So how many guests can fit comfortably? And I put comfortably in there because it's important. It's not about like, I can fit 2 bunk beds in this room. It's not about like fitting as many people. And then the other thing is, does it make sense for the total number of guests? So that goes back to the guest to bathroom ratio is like a really big one. It's like if you have a 5-bedroom house, or you can say you have 5 bedrooms, but you got 1 full bath, like people are not going to stay there, because can you imagine like 10 people sharing a bathroom is not a dorm. Like they're not in a hostel. They're like there on vacation. So that is going to be super important. And that also goes back to the listing data I showed before where it says 25% or 26% was 2-bedroom, 50% is 1-bedroom. So that's also where you can stand out too, is like what size and layout makes sense. So these are the 3 things that I look at when I evaluate a property, when I think how good a property is going to do. And as we talk more is how to, I'll get that later when we talk about how to start a profitable Airbnb. So what is not a good indicator? Like when you ask people like, hey, I want to buy a place, how much is this? I think that one question everybody asks is like, how much occupancy is this house going to be? How occupied is it going to be? Or what's the nightly rate going to be? And those are good questions to ask, but they don't give you the whole picture. So you can always be 100% occupied if your rates are low enough. Just think the long-term rental. You're occupied for years at a time, potentially, but that's because your rates are low. And the goal, as I had initially, is that the goal is to get the most revenue out of that property, because that's the point of a short-term rental, is that you can make more money. Otherwise, why not leave it as a long-term rental and not have to deal with anything? So the goal of a short-term rental is to get as much revenue as you can out of that property, and it's not always about the occupancy, and it's not only about the nightly rate. You got to look at both. So what I look for instead is the occupancy plus the daily rate, because if you're 100% occupied, your rates aren't too low. And if your rates are too high, then you might not be too occupied. You might only be booking the weekends, and that's not great either. So it's got to be a balance of the occupancy plus the rate. And then also what I look for typically is the average monthly revenue over 12 months. So it's great if you can make 10 grand 1 month, but what are you making throughout the year? Because 10 grand 1 month is not going to be enough for 12 months, you know? Like when I hear people say, oh, I'm buying this house because it's next to Kings Island. But Kings Island's only open a few months out of the year. So what are you going to do the rest of the year if Kings Island is not open? So you can't just depend on one thing. It's got to be lots of factors that determine this. So I'm going to go through my framework for how I start high revenue Airbnbs. And I would have to say, all of the property. So I subscribe to this software where I can see how my property is doing versus all the other property managers in the area. And it's not AirDNA, because AirDNA scrapes data. They don't have real reservation data. So I actually have to pay more for other software where they collect real reservation data. And our properties typically have a lot higher occupancy and a lot higher revenue at the same time. So it's not about just occupancy or just rates. It's about having both at the same time. And so I'm going to share my framework for how I'm able to get our properties to do higher occupancy and higher rates than market. And this is like exactly how I follow. It's kind of simple. I don't know, maybe we'll get to the specific questions later, but principally, this is how I think about things. The first one is picking properties and locations where guests want to be. So when I say location is important, it's important. So I will not sacrifice anything for location. So it could be a new construction, like for any of you guys who's familiar with downtown, it could be a new construction on like this street on Mohawk or Vine where there's like nothing going on except that new construction. I would not do that, because one house is not going to overcome that location for a guest who's visiting. So like nothing is going to overcome a bad location, basically, or a undesirable location. And then the other thing is the size and the layout that gives you an advantage. So when I say downtown has so many 1-bedroom condos, it's fine if you want to do a 1-bedroom condo, but you better stand out from the other listings to why people want to stay with you. But what I like to do is see where in the market I have an advantage. So for example, in Hyde Park, there's not a lot of 2 baths. Like the homes are just old. They've got 1 bath, maybe 1.5 bath, because they converted like a closet into a half bath. But the advantage there is being able to provide that 2 full bath that is not in the basement, like real 2 full baths. That because that's what guests are looking for. You are standing out from others in the area because they don't have that and you do. Or having a garage or even parking like downtown, because it's so hard to find parking. Either park on the street, you've got to park in a parking garage. If your place comes with a garage or a driveway, that's infinitely better than being out in Westchester, for example, where it's common to just have 2-car garages with all the houses. So it's like having an advantage with the size and the layout of that neighborhood. And it can't just be like a generic thing. It has to be specific to that neighborhood. So if I say a 4-bed, 3.5 bath would do so well in Hyde Park, but if you take a 4-bed, 3.5 bath and put it in Westchester or Mason, is like common. Like most houses are that layout. So what does well in Hyde Park would not translate to something in Westchester and Mason because everybody already has that. So picking a property location first and then the size and layout that gives you the advantage. And then just to give you an example, when I first started, I had so many, I basically just like did any short-term rental I could, and they were not in the best areas. And I literally learned that the hard way because it was like so many headaches from people who say, I don't like this. I want to leave. Like they would show up and they would say, I want to leave. I want a refund. You'll just get a lot of these negative things and it takes up so much more of your time than if you just provide like something that they really love from the beginning, that now you don't have to focus on these like things, it's just a lot easier. I had places where like somebody got shot out there and a guest was staying there and they're like, oh my gosh, somebody just got shot. I'm leaving. I was like, okay, I'm not stopping you. But then there was like a wake out there for like a month with loud music playing. And it's like, how are you supposed to run an Airbnb with that kind of stuff going on? So that's why now I learned my lesson. I don't go anywhere where it's like not a great location. And that could be anything related, like if you're right next to a fire station, just know that either you've got to disclose that or people aren't going to like it. They're going to comment on it. It's like, think about when you travel, like some people might be okay with it. Some people are like, it's not an ideal location. So just different things like that. The second thing is use interior design and amenities to attract high-paying guests and get premium rates. Because what I found is there are guests at every single price point. There are guests that only want to pay $30 a night. There are guests that want to pay $100 a night. There are guests that pay $200. There's guests that pay $500, $700, $1,000 a night. So what kind of guests do you want to stay in your property is dependent on the house, the amenities, everything you provide there. So for me, I find it easier when I have high-paying guests because they usually take care of the property more. Is not always 100% true, but for the most part, like 90% of the time, they take care of the house and they're not complaining about little things. I've often found like guests, maybe they pay like $200 a night for like a 4-bedroom and then they leave you a 3-star review because they're like, oh, well, I expected all these other things. Like it's just different expectations with different guests. And then that's also how you're able to get premium rates. So like our goal is to get the most revenue out of a place. So we want to put things in there so that we can get the most out of that house. And that just translates to higher rates. So a few things on that. Not all cool things will generate money. So you'll see things on TikTok or Instagram where people putting these cool stuff in. And it's cool to like make a reel about it or something. Or maybe you think that door knocker is really freaking cute because it's shaped like this or some animal or whatever, but are people going to pay for that? So that's always the thing that I think about when I put something in is like, is this something people would pay for? So if they don't, then I think about it. If I have extra money in my budget, I might spend it on that. But I prioritize all the things that people are willing to pay for. So that means your furniture, or I would say people would pay for, and it's going to save you money because you don't want to be putting in like a $300 bed and then having to replace it every 6 months because it keeps breaking. So you want something that is going to last That is actually what I do in all my places now. I have furniture that lasts because when I started, I bought the Wayfair stuff, $300 bed, $300 couch, because I was like, let's just get it up and running with the least amount I can. But I would say within a year, everything had to be replaced. So it's like instead of spending it twice, I now just spend it all at the beginning. I have houses with like years of stuff that I don't really have to replace. So that is the other thing, or I guess I kind of merged that into number 2, which is treating furniture and design as an investment, not an expense. So lots of people think, okay, this is so expensive. Maybe I should just reuse some of my furniture I don't want, or go to on Facebook Marketplace and get some things. Maybe go to Bid FTA and get some things. And that's totally fine if that is what you want to do. But I treat my furniture and design as an investment in the property, like you are investing in LVP on the floors or like granite countertops. It's like the exact same thing, because whatever you put in there is going to be a reflection of your property. It's like basically what you are advertising as a short-term rental. Is how it's going to look, is how guests are going to be using it. So it needs to be sturdy. It needs to withstand all the wear and tear. And it has to look good, because you've got to be attracting those people in your listings when they search on Airbnb. So don't get carried away with all the cool things people are putting in. It's like, what actually makes sense here? So like, for example, lots of people in vacation areas are like, oh, a game room is cool. So like, because a lot of them are converting like garages or different rooms into game rooms. And some people want to reapply that same concept here in Cincinnati. And I'm like, well, it doesn't really make sense here because people want garages. They want to actually park the car in there. They don't really want it into a game room. It's more functional here for them to have a garage than a game room. So it's like, what actually makes sense for the different area than what might be cool there. Like maybe in the vacation market, like in Orlando, you have to have theme rooms because that is what required there for you to even make money. Like you have to be putting $100,000 in those themed furnitures. But in Cincinnati, it's a little over the top. Like can you do it? Yes, but it's not necessary. You just have to buy like good furniture and design instead. And let's see, the third one is deliver consistent 5-star guest experiences. And why do you need to do that? And what does it get you, basically, is that you get repeat guests and you get great reviews that turn into more occupancy and higher rates. Because when you have great reviews, people are going to want to book you. When you get more books, you're going to be raising your rates. So like we said earlier, we don't always want to be 100% occupied. So we need to be raising our rates. So that is how that translates to dollars, is having that great guest experience where people only stay with you when they come to Cincinnati. Like I have people that are like, I love your place and you're a great host, you're responsive, all this stuff. So this one guy has stayed for 2 or 3 months and he's like, I need to stay for another 2 to 3 months. And he's like, I only want to stay in this place. So it's like building that loyalty and guests who want to refer you and want to stay in your place. Like it just makes it a lot easier for you. So you're not constantly having to like find people and find guests who come and that kind of thing. It's just like a lot easier when you have that. And the how you do that is all about the details and the customer service and your operations. So if you hate talking to people, I would not recommend that you do the guest communications. Like if you just hate dealing with people who complain, or you don't like dealing with certain people asking dumb questions or something, then find somebody to do it for you, because it's not going to end well or if you're not responsive, like some people just aren't on their phones all the time. And you kind of have to be when you're doing this, because people also, this instant gratification thing, they want answers now. If they don't get an answer from you, they're going to go stay somewhere with a host who will answer them immediately. So that is super important. It's a hospitality customer service business. It's very different from a long-term rental where tenants don't bother you unless there's a problem. And sometimes they might live with the problem for a long time. But with short-term rentals, they let you know, and they let you know immediately, and it needs to be done immediately. It's like, I want it, and I want it now thing. And then the second thing is your operations. So this is why I'm not a big fan of remote management. I always recommend having a great local property manager who is actually physically there and checking on things, is because the hardest part of short-term rentals is the operations. It's like, how do you know things are getting done? Like a cleaner could say, oh, I came in, I cleaned, and they might send you pictures, but you can't see hair in pictures. There's so many things that pictures can't pick up that you need somebody there to check. So this is where that is like super important, is having the operations systematized. And if you just have one, it's okay for you to do a lot of things that are not scalable. But if you're going to have multiple and many, you can't physically go to every single place, spread out across the city. So like having the system is going to be important, and that's how you have sustainable results. And that is basically the principles of how I run my business. Is like when I evaluate, it's actually the end of what I have, but the evaluate a property, what I look for in a property, how we get like really high performing short-term rentals, that is everything I think about when I do it. There's a lot more like tactical stuff, but I feel like going through like the principles is a lot easier, because once you understand that, you'll know like, okay, when you're trying to decide, should I buy this bed or this couch or that couch, is like making it easier for yourself operationally and making it sturdy and making it look good. It's kind of like how I summarize it. But yes, that is all I have for today. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any. Yes.
What's your average occupancy rate?
So I would say I think ours are between 70 to 80%, actually mostly 70, 75% is where it is if it becomes too occupied. So if it's becoming, I would say, I'm not good at math, but if it is if I have more than 5 days, if I have less than 5 days empty out of a month, that means I need to be adjusting my rates. So I'll give it some time and I'll be adjusting my rates, because it's just booking. If it's booking too fast or booking too much too quickly, I will have to adjust my rates. So I'm not always trying to be super occupied. Yeah.
That seems very high for Cincinnati, isn't it? I mean, you're doing way
Yeah, actually, I do have that on here. I did my homework. So this is a software I use. So this is occupancy of our properties versus Ohio properties. I want to say ours is on average, I don't know, in the 70s. I thought I had that on here. Let me look. Was there did I put that at the beginning? I don't know why they all transition differently too. But it's somewhere around the 70 to 75% mark. I think it was here. I think here I just said how much we did better than market. Okay, yeah, so it's not on here, but 70 to 75%. Let's go back here. Yes.
One of the questions I have, and naturally being a lender, I'm just super curious. So DSCR loans for short-term rentals. I know you and I have talked about this in the past. I think you were kind of asking me this, and I'm going to put the question back on you. What I love about short-term rentals is that it gives you access to properties with higher valuations where maybe a long-term rent wouldn't support a DSCR loan. Have you found any DSCR type lenders that will basically use an estimate of what the short-term rental production will be in terms of revenue or income to support, maybe a higher loan amount based upon a DSCR ratio?
So I feel like Before rates went up, there were a lot of lenders that were willing to lend on just AirDNA estimates. Like they're not even like real numbers. So there were a lot that were doing that. But now with the rates higher, and I think a lot of the lending changes, they've gotten a lot tighter on what they will lend on. So I think there might be very few that will lend on estimates alone. But I know there are lenders that will lend based on actuals. So let's say you want to refinance your house and you have like 12 months of actuals, they will use that as a rent. Because the other thing about DSCR is if you don't have any data and it's just a purchase, they often look at just the traditional rental rate, which doesn't really help you because you know you're going to get more, but you can't show that to the lender. They just take the traditional to be safe. And so because of that, you don't really get any benefit. I think it's like maybe if you're refinancing, there are lenders that will do it. But with the purchase, I feel like I might have to go with like a commercial or like an ARM or something.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I've seen the strategy where people will start with a conventional loan, and then they'll basically get a track record like you're saying, and then they'll approach a bank and maybe they'll refinance a portfolio of short-term rentals.
Yeah, I think that would be smart because you have that track record, and I think that's what they're looking for.
That makes perfect sense.
I'm working on one right now. What my lender told me is that instead of the 75% ARV, they would give 65, and they will do it on the long-term rental rates. They don't go by short-term estimates, but they will do it at 65%.
Okay.
And the interest rate is actually lower than the regular lease.
Why are they changing the LTV if they're lending based off the same rental rate?
I asked a good question, but they just like it's more risk for them, right? They're just going based on
Just knowing that you're operating it as a short-term rental, you mean?
Yeah. Lenders are very arbitrary.
Yeah,
From what I've
you're
seen.
gonna have, like February, we're gonna have like a bunch of people in Hamilton where Matt have February, and they will have nobody booked in February.
Yeah.
Like nobody. So a lender's looking at it like, okay, did you make enough every other month to make it for February where you make nothing and you still pay out?
Right. It's good to know.
Yeah. I think Stacey had some.
I have a lot of people looking at duplexes, like maybe a 2-1 on each side.
Mhm.
I find that it's really hard with one bedrooms. I'm sure a 2-2 or a 3-2 would rent better. How does like a duplex with a one bedroom or bathroom rather with a one bathroom?
Yeah.
How does that affect you?
Okay, so here's my thing on duplexes. When it initially, like when I first started, duplexes were totally fine. Now with the higher supply, I feel like duplexes don't do as well as a short-term rental because people don't want that shared wall or room, because I also get a bunch of complaints where it's like, I can hear what they're saying down there, or they can hear what you're doing up there. So it's like, unless you have really good insulation, like condo buildings where, I mean, even that's not very well insulated, but a lot better than if you had a duplex with the floor, like you can hear everything. That's just going to be the biggest thing. Lots of people want single family homes. So I feel like single family homes are going to be the best way to go. But with duplexes, I think multifamilies are better for like midterm rentals, I feel like, because you have, because then you can go after like the traveling nurses who they don't care if it's an apartment or a single family home. Some people with a pet might care, but a lot of times you get people who are like, I only want to pay this amount. And so when you have a multifamily, like a 4-unit, or I guess on a duplex, it would depend if the numbers will work out, because they will only pay, you know, like $1,700 to $1,800 or max $2,000 if they're bringing their pet. So it's like, will that work for your duplex? But I would say a 4-family would be like great for like a traveling nurse, because, you know, a 1-bed, 1-bath, that's all they need. And they'll pay that $1,600, $1,700, $1,800. So you have like space in there to fluctuate.
So is 2, 3, or 4 bedroom, 2 bath the most popular
Single
single family?
family, depending on area, but I would say 3-bed, 1-bath is good. 3-bed, 1-bath would be like the minimum, I think. 3-bed, 2-bath would be ideal, because at that point, you don't want to be too small, because then you're only limiting to certain people, like a couple or something, or a couple with a dog. with a 3-bed, 2-bath, most families can fit in it. So you can have like people coming. You have more flexibility. If you need to rent to a couple, they will fit in it. But if you're trying to like fit a family, it will also fit. So I feel like a 3-1, 3-2 it would be good. Yeah.
How are you on pets? Are you flexible on particular listings, or do you just across the board have a no pet policy?
I typically default to no pets, and I just wait for them to ask if they can bring their pet. But I know ahead of time in my head as I'm designing the listing to know if I will allow pets here or not. And so with that in mind, then like certain furniture has to be pet friendly. Like you don't want things that attract a bunch of hair, things that can be like hard to clean up, or lots of carpet if you know like a dog might pee on it or whatever, like things like that. So I would like have that in the back of your mind. But most of the time I default to no pets unless they're staying a long time. So like a midterm rental, lots of them are going to be having their pets with them. Or like insurance claims are going to want their dogs and cats with them. So I'll allow it then. But typically I won't unless I'm really having issues with that place and I need to have a pet to get more bookings. But typically no.
And you charge a higher cleaning fee then? If it is a pet?
So if there is a pet, I'll charge them a pet fee. And then I feel like that usually covers the additional cleaning fee. Or sometimes if I might also add like a deposit. If they're staying for a long time, I'll add like a pet deposit. But if they're staying, let's say like 2 nights or something, then I'll just charge like a pet fee.
I've heard some investors,
Those are good.
I've heard some investors say if you're looking at buying a short-term rental, you should also cash flow as a long-term rental. But to me, that seems like different products and that seems difficult, especially in the areas, the A-type areas.
Right.
What's your...
Yeah, so I'm in it for the long term. Like if I'm doing a short-term rental, I'm committing to a short-term rental. So there's no like plan B, plan C, whatever I'm going to do. I know lots of people say that because usually when I pick out a place for a short-term rental, I know it's going to do well as a short-term rental. I'm not going back and doing it long-term. So it depends like what they want to do. Like I know the people who have switched back to long-term is because their property isn't performing as a short-term, and it's just because of their location, the things they put in it, or the way they've operated it. So it's like if you have that down, then you don't need to go back to a long-term, because as long as you're making or doing better than your long-term, most of the time it's going to be better than your long-term over the long period. It's just what happens.
Regulations change.
Not
Like,
if I'm in the
everything
city of
is worried.
Cincinnati.
I have short-term, midterm, long, I have all the things. And regulations, you may not know anything about it unless you live there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I'm like, for me, I always buy knowing like if I need this to be a long-term because I'm forced to do it, I can, and I'm still good.
Yeah, you could do it that way. I feel like for the city of Cincinnati, I don't think they're going to be changing anything soon. So like for mine, I don't
But like
think of it that
Westchester,
way.
Fairfield Township, there's rumblings all over it. There's court cases trying to get rid of them right now.
I know. I have one.
Like,
yeah, so
super anxious.
it could.
That county regulated them?
No, it can be
The
specific
township.
neighborhoods
Right.
even. And create.
Yeah, Hamilton's just going crazy.
Oh, yeah.
No, not even HOAs.
No, it's Hamilton.
People within a certain community can get together and rally. Yes, they're doing it right now in Fairfield Township.
Whether it's legal or not, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like when you get outside the city of Cincinnati, it's like the wild, wild west. People can do
Yes.
whatever they want to do. Yeah, seriously, like all these townships, they don't want anything in the backyard. They tell you there's like brothels going on or all these things, or like, what's it called? Sex offenders there. And I'm like, I don't know. If a real sex offender lived there, they're permanent. You know what I mean? But I don't know. That's what they say. That's what they think.
Yep, I'm doing the fight right now too.
Yeah.
It's fun.
On a similar note, I've seen a lot of posts in the short-term rental Facebook group where
Mhm.
people are like, hey, I got this sketchy booking. Has anybody ever had experience with this person? People will make fake profiles. Like, any advice for people on how to avoid bad stays from tenants that are booking last minute and are going to probably be the reason why the neighbors make those phone calls or start rallying together?
Yeah, I don't know if that really is a reason. I think the neighbors are just like, it's mental for them. It's not actually they had a bad experience. They're just like, it's in their head. But bad guests is you have to vet them. And this sounds really bad, but I think of it like pest control, you know, like you want to keep the pests out. You don't want to be treating them once they're in here. So it's the same thing with the guests. It's like you want to keep the bad guests out because if they come in, they're going to cause damages, they're going to make a mess or everything. So I would rather be safe than sorry and not let guests stay than have a bad guest stay. So, and that just comes to like vetting them, like asking them questions. What are you doing here? What brings you here? And I think it's probably just because I've been doing it enough, just like maybe when you guys vet long-term tenants, you know, once they say something, if this is like real or not real, with experience, you'll kind of know like, is this person actually legit or not? And then decline or deny based on that. But there's like always some red flags I can read and be like, okay, this person is just
Like,
out.
can we talk offline? Here's my WhatsApp number.
Yeah, that's for sure spam. Yeah, now I block them at the first message they send. They send a message and I just respond with spam and then I block them. But yeah.
So I listened to your podcast episode with these guys this morning, and it was great.
Oh, thanks.
And I actually liked it better than the Bigger Pockets podcast.
Oh, cool.
Episode. I thought there was more in there. So.
Yeah, I think we talked longer.
But anyway, so you mentioned more about your vetting or your inspecting the cleaners process. And I'm curious because you said that most of the time your cleaners are really great. They have great work ethic. They're trying to do their best every day, but inevitably something gets missed. So I have a couple questions around that. I would just love to hear about your system with that. One of my questions is, who is doing that and how is it because you have so many listings that you can have somebody in that position that does it? Or I want to hear about that, but then I also want to hear about if you how are you setting expectations with your cleaners? If you go and you find something, are you telling them every single time what you find? Do you have like a inspection sheet, or are you like, okay, we're gonna miss something, that's why I'm here, I'm gonna let that go, I know that they're doing their best?
Yeah, okay, so the first thing on who was doing it, when I started, I did it. Well, actually, when I started, I didn't do it. I trusted the cleaners.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, this is obviously not working. So then I started doing it. And then I had to wait until I got to a certain point where I could hire somebody, but then also hire the right person because not everybody has an eye for details. So it took me a long time to find somebody, like 3 years to find somebody who can actually do it. So last year I hired somebody to do that for me only. So that's what she does basically.
Is she hourly or is
She's salary.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of not being hourly because I want to pay for the results. I don't care how long you spend on it. So like if you need to take 5 hours or if you need to take 1 hour, that's on you, but I want it like a certain way.
But are you talking about the cleaner or the inspector?
Both.
Okay.
They're all paid like a flat per job.
Okay.
Or the employee is salary. And then the other question on, what was your other question?
Like how nitpicky are you basically?
Okay,
How much
on the
are you
cleaners.
telling- I can't go and inspect one of mine without being like, okay, you missed this, and this. Like, I am trying to see what your expectations are. If you, obviously, you said that not everybody's gonna be perfect. How much grace do you give? And how much are you
Okay.
talking with them?
Okay, got it. So when a cleaner, so now I have like a whole flow for when I hire cleaners, is I give them my expectations up front. Like I'll do trials with them and then I give them my expectations up front. And then there's my non-negotiables. So it's like, if they hit any of those non-negotiables, they're out. There's like no questions. Like if I ever question whether you change sheets, like that's a no-go. Like you're not cleaning for me anymore. There's like certain non-negotiables. And then if it's like some things I find I give them feedback after an inspection. But if it's like minor, like if I found a few pieces of hair here and there, I'll let it go. But if I look and I'm like, it looks like they did not clean this bathroom, then I'm gonna have to say something. Or if I see a trend. So if they keep doing the same thing like 3 times, every single time I check after them, they're doing the same thing, then I'll tell them. And then basically it's just like how much patience you have. I have a very short patience. So if I'm to give them feedback all the freaking time, every single clean, I gotta tell them something, or I have to give them the same feedback all the time. So like, for example, one of the cleaners I'm trying out, I don't know what the issue is. She can't be consistent. Like I give her feedback, the next clean is good. And then like 2 cleans later, it goes back to not being good. So it's like, okay, at some point I'm gonna be tired of this flip-flop thing, so you're gonna be out. I'm gonna find somebody else, because I don't want people who are just gonna be like, I have to stay on their ass all the freaking time. It's like annoying, you know? So it's like,
That app too, like Breezeway?
I use Breezeway. Yeah, so that helps a lot. Like I schedule their cleans. They know how everything is.
Whenever they actually did it.
Yeah, they gotta take pictures. But pictures is mostly like documentation for Airbnb if a guest breaks something or they say something's missing or something like that. But yeah, like some things I can let go here and there, but if it's causing more problems for me, they gotta go, because you know, it can't be causing more work for me. I can't keep cleaning after the cleaner. Like that's not the point. So that's usually when I stop. But I will always be looking for cleaners. Like sometimes it's a pain to always look for cleaners, but it's one of those things where you have to like always be looking for that. Yeah. Oh, whoever.
So when it comes to reviews, so we know from watching even podcasts and stuff and all, there's always a larger rate of people who surf than people who even attend and don't write reviews. So like, what are you doing to incentivize your guests who stay to actually leave a review rather than just remain silent like we see what most people do online today anyway?
So my thing on reviews is I want them to leave me a review if I think they're going to give me a good review. Because I don't want to ask people to leave me a review and they leave me like a 3-star or 4-star. Because on Airbnb, if they leave anything less than a 5-star, that's like a penalty to you. So it's like some people also don't understand the rating system on Airbnb too. So they think it's great and they leave you a 4-star review and it's like, oh my gosh, that just dropped your rating and that just lowered you on the rankings of your listing. So I kind of have to think, did they have a good experience? Are they gonna leave me a good review? And then I'll send them a message and say like, hey, thanks for being a great guest. Like if you liked it, I would love if you could leave me a 5-star review or something like that. And then most of the time if they don't leave a review, that's okay, because I don't want it to be negatively impacting me. But if they like it, they will leave a 5-star.
What's an emergency situation in a short-term rental? Like usually in long-term we sign the leases and say anything heating or plumbing is not emergency, or like what kind of situations you run into short-term that
is an emergency. It depends on the guest, but some of them see lots of things as emergency things. For sure, like if the HVAC, all of that is sometimes it could be like the smoke detector is beeping. Like you got to get it fixed because nobody's going to sleep at night with that going on. Sometimes it could be like a user error thing. Like for example, I had a guest, I don't know what happened. She ran out the hot water. She's like, there's no hot water. And I was like, how is that possible? There's no hot water. She was like, yeah, this hot water heater is not working. But it's just because she ran out the hot water. So like that is an emergency for them.
Did you bring her new hot water?
Yeah, I carried a new hot water heater for
Did you
them.
learn how to use the stove?
No, I told her to. Well, I was like, okay, we'll send somebody over there. But no, this is like 10 p.m. They never have issues when it's like 1 p.m. It's always like 10 p.m. And then
a timer,
yeah.
10-minute timer.
And then she's like, oh, okay, it's back. Because she was like, it's not lighting, it's not doing this and that. And I was like, I'm just gonna have to see it because sometimes you just have to see it. Like they don't always know how to troubleshoot. Just like random things, any random thing could be an emergency for them. Like they just want it now. Like they're not gonna wait that long for something to get fixed.
Basically, if they're calling, it's an emergency.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Unless they say like, don't worry about it right now. Like if they say, oh, this light bulb is out, don't worry about it right now. But that kind of stuff. Or they'll say like, I'm trying to think what else. I'm missing a hair dryer, but don't worry about it because I got others.
At midnight, would that be an emergency? Or would you
No, to be honest, I don't have any calls at late at night. If it's like an HVAC or something and I know it's going to get into the night and I know that HVAC is broken and somebody can't go out there, I'll either say we'll bring you fans if that works for you. If not, I'll have to move them to somewhere else. So it's not really going to extend into night. Or if they say I want to leave, I'm like, you can leave and we'll just give you a refund. But it's not going to be like, because nobody's going to be working at midnight, you know? So there's no, yeah.
Unless you pay, I'm sorry.
For the maintenance plan, right?
You've had your hand on like, you know, with dollars you pay, unless you pay like an HVAC company, their astronomical rate at the, overnight.
Yeah, I mean,
They'll come out for that. They're happy to come out. Yeah, it's really not worth it.
First, you got to get them on the phone, though.
Right. Or you can call me and I'll try to help you out.
There you go.
At no cost.
you know, you got to have your phone on 24/7.
My question was, you mentioned software that you're using that's comparing you against other STRs. What is that software?
It's called Key Data, but I wouldn't recommend it unless because they have like minimums. So like unless you have, you know, enough to sustain that, I wouldn't do it. It's just they connect to property managers who are in the area, so they get like real reservation data, and then that's how they're comparing like how people are. Like AirDNA doesn't. They just like scrape data. They just like look and see when the calendar is booked, when it's blocked off, what the nightly rates are, and they take an estimate. So it doesn't really know if you're blocking it off for like maintenance or you're self-staying or something, or if you got like a long-term stay, it won't know that. So that's kind of the thing with AirDNA. But they are starting their own pricing software. And I feel like the reason they're doing that is so they can get reservation data. So they know like what the actual numbers are to make it more accurate. AirDNA have their own pricing software that you can connect to, and they'll do your pricing for you.
Also, you mentioned screening guests. Do you not do instant book, or is this outside of people being able to book?
I do instant book, but I have that setting on where they have to have good reviews. And then if they instant book, no, I think a lot of times if they, bad guests can also still be, have good reviews. I don't know why lots of bad guests have good reviews. I think it's like the auto reviews things that people do. But yeah, I don't. I do the instant book.
Well, and you can do instant book too, but if you say like you can't, like I need 2 days between guests
Right.
or something, and then I don't really need 2 days, it's clean, but it'll make
Right.
a request.
Right.
If it is instant book, like, hey,
Yeah.
can I stay here? And then they come sure.
Yeah, you could do that too.
Also, are you on multiple platforms or just Airbnb?
Yes, I'm on Airbnb, VRBO, and then Booking.com and Marriott, Google, and my own website, basically, which is only for people who don't want to pay a platform fee. Yeah.
To get on Google, do you have to, like, is Google sourcing that data from other platforms? Or can you go directly through Google?
I think you would have to go through a PMS, like a property management software at that point, because you got to be syncing to the multiple channels.
Right.
So I think it would be beneficial to do a PMS through a PMS.
You have to do it. Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think you can do it directly on Google because I think on their back end, there's like so much stuff that goes on their back end that they only like sync to different softwares. That too. So that's also why you have a property management software. So it'll sync immediately.
All right, we'll probably do 2 more questions, and then, I don't know, are you staying after, or do you have to go, or?
I can stay after, yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll do 2 more, and then if you guys have specific questions after.
My question got answered. I had something else that's not even a question.
Uh-oh.
I thought you'd get a kick out of it. I stayed at an Airbnb in Nashville a few weeks back for a bachelor party. It was a 4-bedroom house, and I think it slept like 16 or 18 people. You talked about like the bunk beds.
Yeah.
I think they had like 5 or 6 sets of bunk beds.
Yeah.
They made the garage a game room and stuck a bunk bed in there too. So,
Yeah, I think that's their goal is to like get as
some of
many
the bunk beds
people.
were 3-level bunk
Right,
beds.
yeah.
Oh, wow. So that's a lot.
So did you guys sleep in it, in the bunk beds?
Sorry,
Did you guys sleep in the bunk beds?
we had to. Yeah, we had to.
Did you like sleeping in the bunk beds?
Sorry,
Did you like sleeping in the bunk beds?
I luckily was in one of the few not bunk beds.
You just put the mattress down and just lay on the floor. We did that too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like bunk beds. I mean, there's lots of reasons why I don't like it. There's like the liability thing because like my insurance is just a lot higher with a bunk bed. So there was one I started out with a bunk bed and they charged me like more for it because I had a bunk bed. But that was not the reason why. I just like took it down. So it's like 2 side-by-side beds. But the liability thing, it's harder for cleaners to clean. So like you want to make it easier for cleaners to keep things, because they're already going to take shortcuts when they can. So you want to make it as easy for them to clean as possible. And bunk beds is just a pain to make the bed when you're up there. So that's also why I don't like it. Yeah, I think it would be cool for kids maybe, but no adults really want to sleep in a bunk
Drunk
bed.
people in Nashville trying to climb into a bunk bed.
Yeah, that's not good. That's why the liability insurance is high.
All right, 1 more? Yeah, I know you had your hand up.
So I'm curious, I know that you said that like every Airbnb is like different for like calculating percent return. Is there like a certain minimum percent return that you're looking for when you're investing into an Airbnb?
So I look at, I don't know what other people look at, but I look at cash flow and I look at my returns on, well, I call returns on investment, like returns on how many dollars I had to put into this house.
Cash on cash return.
Yeah, well, cash on cash is like just 1 year, right? I think it's just 1 year, but I'm looking at it over a long term because it takes the takes into account the time, the compounding time of money. I guess is that the right to say it? But yeah, that's why I like looking at the ROI versus like COC, like the cash on cash, because you're not really making that investment every single year. You made it once and then you're getting it every single year. So I look at that, the ROI, like how much money do I have to put in? And then I look at how much money am I making every single month.
So is there like, what's that percentage that you're like looking minimum?
I feel like ours have been in the 20s. And then for my cash flow, it just kind of depends like what number you want to get, you know?
Yeah.
So,
How much
yeah.
money did you make last year after tax? I'm just kidding.
That's kind of hard to answer because you got like the real number and then you got the tax return number. You can ask my accountant. He probably did. Yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, I mean, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.